Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And we're back, and we are moving into our conversation for this morning with the Vice President of the Public Service Union. We're joined by Dean Flowers. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Marlene. Good morning.
Good morning, Dean.
How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Well rested. Favorite day of the day, Monday. Sorry, favorite day of the week.
Yeah, the day to set everything in motion. Well, we ended off in what seemed like a bit of uncertainty when it came to the government and union negotiations. We heard from the president of the BNTU, and now we get to hear from you directly as to what exactly took place that has left us in what seems like a stalemate.
I thought about the situation over the weekend, starting with when the Prime Minister stated that, in a sense, we were back at square one. And I would have to agree with what the sister from the BNTU said, the president of the BNTU. To the best of our knowledge, we don't believe that we're back at square one. On the contrary, we believe that the meeting held with the Prime Minister and the Financial Secretary and his team was a success. We believe that the impasse that existed no longer exists. And the wording of the agreement coming out of the meeting that was sent to us, which the Prime Minister stated at his press conference, did not necessarily sit well with them, or at least they were, as Sister Elena rightly said, there was the use of the word deferred versus the word foregone. We don't believe that that is a good enough reason for us to be back at square one. And so we have since reconsidered our position where the use of the word defer is concerned. And we've said, look, the general content of the agreement is what is important, and the meat of this agreement will be hashed out going forward, with us doing what we need to do to ensure that this economy rebounds and that government changes its policy where the current wastage and, if I can say, reckless spending in the public service is concerned. So
Part of what I wanted to discuss. Our last conversation last week, you were very much critical of the spending that takes place within government and at the proposal of giving up a yearly increment. You pointed out to many areas of inefficiencies where you'd also wanted to see some cost saving taking place. Now, all indications after Wednesday when you met virtually with the Prime Minister was that one, things were cordial, and two, that you were able to work out some sort of arrangement. So tell us, what you were able to achieve in being able to communicate, especially the inefficiencies and how they can increase the cost saving that we're working towards.
Okay, well, I must say that the Prime Minister was very welcoming of the initial cost savings measures that we had proposed. He readily said that he has looked at them and he's in agreement that some of them are good to go. He has asked that we look at putting together a committee which will comprise of both the union and official side, and that the details and implementation of those, and also more importantly, the monitoring of those over the short, medium, and long term can be hashed out. And for me, that's a win. And I think that, as I said,
So you're saying there's no commitment to these measures. There's a commitment to form a committee to look at these measures in the future. Is that what I'm understanding?
there is a commitment for the setting up of a committee, and in the TOR of that committee is whereby the details will be in terms of how we go about implementing these cost savings measures, as well as monitoring the rebound of the economy.
Let
And
me
so
ask a
that is the
question.
meat of the matter.
Let me ask you a question here based on an observation that appears to be quite obvious to many who are watching from the outside. You're looking at being able to identify certain areas where you could scale down on wastage and what have you. But the government itself, for the most part, is made up of public officers, right? So essentially, you would be looking at your colleagues to say, well, these are some of the areas where you guys have to be able to curtail your expenses, correct?
Exactly, Isani. Exactly. We will have to embark on an educational campaign whereby we do what we need to do as a union to properly inform and educate our membership on the importance of cost saving measures, and also more importantly on the importance of enhancing revenue collection, and as we have been brainstorming, the importance of doing the right thing. And so we definitely look forward to putting our heads together and see how we can come up with creative ways of motivating public officers to be more productive and more conscientious while
Let
while
me ask,
while
let me ask a follow-up question to that, but from another angle here. Within the broader membership of the Public Service Union, I would want to think that perhaps not all public officers are in agreement with the position taken by the executive insofar as these negotiations, right? Perhaps there are some who would willingly want to waive altogether whatever increments they would have been eligible for given the existing state of affairs. What is the difficulty, in your opinion, why this can't be so as a general rule, to say, you know what, we fully understand that the government is on its knees, the economy is on its knees, and that it takes a collective effort from all of us to work together. In lieu of that, I can step away from my increment this year. Explain to us what is the difficulty in that collective mindset?
Okay, I think that from my personal perspective, Isani, and I think I would go on a limb here and say even from the union perspective, I think as a general rule, we all agree as public officers, or the vast majority of public officers agree that as public servants, we need to make a sacrifice. And the Public Service Union, since day one, has not said that we are not to make a sacrifice. We have been prepared to defer, or we were always prepared to defer the increment, which would have meant foregoing the increment, which would have resulted in financial loss to every single public officer. And we were not against that. It was simply a matter of, as the Prime Minister said, he believed that we should forego it completely. And we were saying, we would like to make that sacrifice, but we would like to reduce the ultimate cost to us. So I think all public officers in general are of the view that yes, sacrifice. So
to be fair though, Dean, that has been communicated multiple times by several of the union leadership, that you in fact have always said that you are open to doing your part in cutting down. But the critical issue here, and I really want to be able to understand it better, is the difference between what that cut would be. So the government proposed 1 year, no increments. You were very clear in being able to communicate your position last week in saying that losing an increment in 1 year, which may be less than 100, for example, actually results in thousands of dollars in losses at the point of retirement. So therefore, you proposed deferring 3 to 5 years, and with the stipulation that the economy would recover and whatnot. What was actually agreed to in that meeting?
What was actually agreed to, in essence, is that we will look at the recovery of the economy. And so, in my view, it is no different from when the union entered negotiations with the government back in 2014,
Yeah.
whereby our increments hinged on the performance of the economy, and that
Yes.
was the first time that we saw the formulation of the cost savings committees, the revenue enhancement committees, and so it's no different from that period of time. So we've been down this road before,
Yeah.
and so we're confident that we will pull
Yes,
together.
but like Senator Smith said on Friday, words matter. And forego means, very simply, you won't get it. Defer means you won't get it now, but you'll get it later. So what was agreed to?
Uh, it was agreed that we will forego the increment, Marlene, because, as I stated earlier, we realized that we have been dragged into a discussion that is focusing primarily on an increment, which, as the Prime Minister rightly said, is a drop in the bucket. And we've lost focus of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that we have a big government, we have a wasteful government, we have a public service that is not as productive as it ought to be. And so we're now getting back to what's important, and we will not allow the discussions to continue so that the bigger issue here, which is addressing the economy, addressing how the public service function continues to be derailed.
So
Maybe
I'm a bit, for clarity, as far as it has been communicated so far by the Prime Minister and the President of the BNTU, the issue was about the word forego. So if you're saying that you agreed to forego, which means not get your increment, now never, then what is the issue in terms of the agreement on the table?
in the meeting, when we had the meeting, all right, we had discussed forego versus defer. It was our view when and I kind of presented uh, to the official side that if it is that we were looking at perhaps factoring in that increment or getting back that increment at the point of retirement, then it's a deferment of the increment and not a foregoing of the increment. And I think at that point in time, we held a discussion and the official side agreed that, okay, for clarity or simplistic communication, let's use the word defer. And so, in our view, we knew what uh, we wouldn't be getting the increment, and that the situation would have been revisited at the point of retirement. Um, so, where the confusion lies,
So you're saying in the meeting, you agreed to use the wording defer, which
yes,
means not now, but later,
yes.
and instead the document came back saying forego, which means not now and never.
Yes, and so, but the catch within the document is that the government is prepared to revisit the situation if and when the economy rebounds. So, in essence, that puts us on good footing that, look, we could get back this increment within 5 years, within maybe less. We don't know. What needs to happen is that we need to do what we need to do to be able to either get back this increment or get a higher increase, because it may be that um, our insistence on improving the efficiency within the public service may yield considerable savings and may yield higher revenues for government. And by the grace of God, hopefully, we'll be in a better position in years to come. And that would
So let
then
me
give
let me
the
ask you this then.
to renegotiate.
Essentially, what this does is this will bind whatever successive administration there is, right?
Yes,
Doesn't have to be this particular UDP administration. It could be a PUP or whatever other administration down the road. And so if we're looking at economic recovery, first and foremost, to be able to then revisit the idea of now being able to pay the public officers their due increments, what's to say that whenever that time comes, there'll be another deferral? They could say, well, you know what? Our economy still isn't where we need it to be because the effects or the consequences of the whole COVID-19 crisis, we're still on the up and up. It'll be another situation where they can kick it down the road again.
Yes, Isani, you're perfectly right. However, and that's why the monitoring mechanism for us is what's important. Our participation in the decision-making processes is what's important. Because being involved in that process will give us the opportunity to have a voice at the table and to say, wait, we have the numbers, we've been participating in this process over the course of the years, and we don't share that view. And so I am not of the view that it would be as the situation is right now, whereby we're hearing a lot of numbers being thrown out, but we're having difficulty reconciling these numbers. And so formulating the committee would put us in a better position going forward to be able to agree and issue joint statements with the government as to whether or not the economy is in fact hemorrhaging or improving or healing, you know.
Dean, but how do you get a head start? And I want to come back to find out what your unions are saying about going ahead with the wording for go versus deferring, because that was very clearly articulated by the BNGU president on Friday that seemed to have been a sticking issue. But you keep on talking about the committee that would be put together to look at some of the cost-saving measures. Now, what was communicated on Thursday by the Prime Minister is very clear. We are facing a deficit that there needs to be cuts. There needs to be a real downsizing in terms of expenses to be able to meet things like just your base salary. Is a committee the most effective way? Because if we look at the track records of committees being put together to look at finances and make recommendations, that's not going to meet the end of the month deadline by the time some of these payments are due.
Hence the reason I said earlier, Marlene, that the conversation got twisted, whereby the reforms and the monitoring mechanisms should have been at the forefront of the discussion and not necessarily the increments. Yes, the increment has financial value to public officers, but I think that ultimately, if we change the way how we do things, the increment itself could be taken care of. And so, in regards to your view in terms of whether or not the committee would be the most a proper mechanism to look at the situation, then perhaps going forward, perhaps the union can make suggestions such as bringing on board the private sector. We have seen releases from the private sector, releases from the BBB, releases from other political entities. Clearly, Marlene, the unions and the government does not have all the solutions. So perhaps we need to look at all possible angles, look at this thing from all possible angles, and bring on board any and everybody that would be able to help. So for the time being, clearly the government and the union will be formulating a committee. The onus is now on us, the union.
No, my question isn't about, I think, just to be clear, if I could rephrase it, do you believe that it will be effective and effective immediately?
Yes, I believe it will be effective because that is the only.
And immediately?
Immediately, the Prime Minister is clear that even if he was to implement immediately some of the cost savings measures that we are suggesting, that it would not yield the kind of savings or the kind of slashes that would be required to meet the immediate obligation. So clearly, the approach has to be twofold. It has to be significantly looking at how we reduce our spending, while at the same time seeing how we improve our revenues. And we have not had an extensive discussion publicly with regards to that area, revenue enhancement. And so clearly the Prime Minister has said, look, we could cut here, cut there, and cut everywhere, but it will not yield the kind of savings. So to answer your question, clearly it will help, but it will not fix the situation. We have to look at both cost savings as well as revenue enhancement. And as we already know, we have a lot of leakages in the system,
Yeah.
and we can be more efficient in bumping up our revenue collection. And so that will be the work for the committee, and that's why I said that the important thing going forward is for us to look at this committee and, more importantly, craft the terms of reference of this committee in such a way that it will be all encompassing, and that we as union reach out to the private sector and any other organization that will be able to help us and guide us in recovering this economy.
So the intention was to be able to discuss with the membership whether you would agree to the document that's put forward based on the negotiation that you had on Wednesday. As I said, we interviewed the president of the BNT on Friday, and she did express that she would go back to her membership, one, but two, that there would be concerns about the word forego. On behalf of the PSU, what is the indication? Are you deciding to move ahead with the current wording? Are you going to request a change in the wording? What is the next step?
The next step is full steam ahead with the recovery, with working on the recovery.
No, I'm asking about the wording issue.
For the agreement.
Is it agreed that you will go ahead with forego or demand defer?
Yeah, I think that I thought I had made it clear that we will not be backed down with the word forego versus defer.
Is this a collective union decision or just the PSU?
It's a collective union decision. Okay. I'm pretty quite sure that before the end of the day, something official will be coming out of the Ministry of Finance where that matter is concerned. We cannot allow this conversation to continue, Marlene, simply because one party would like the word deferment versus foregoing. What we need to focus about is that whether you use defer or whether you use forego, it does not remove the opportunity for us to recover this increment or for us to get a higher increment if and when this economy rebounds. And that is where our focus will be now. So we will not allow...
So I think just before you move off of that, you keep on saying maybe there'll be a higher increment. In the last negotiations, you also included the one that you speak of very clearly where the increments were tied to the status of the economy. And there, you guys went at length to be able to clearly define what percentage or at what point and what percentage you would then be able to get these increased benefits. Are you also looking to be able to include that in these negotiations or in this official agreement? Because, and again, I believe Senator Smith said it on Friday, words do matter. And contracts or agreements or written or signed documents that are unclear can very easily lead to loopholes in the future. So you may be told now that you may be able to get a higher increment, but as Isania mentioned, there will be a change because Prime Minister Barrow will no longer be the leader of the country at some point in time. And so whoever is facing that decision may decide how they want to interpret that. So how do you ensure security for your union members when there's a bit of a gray area?
Okay, well, the conversation right now hinges solely on the increment, right? And that's a 2.5% on average that everybody gets. So that's where the focus is at this moment, that at minimum, at bare minimum, if we do what we need to do, and that if we reform ourselves and how we operate in the public sector, that we will get at minimum of 2.5. But what if we outperform?
At what point, though? I feel that you seem to be avoiding responding to this question. because I've asked it in many different ways. How do you ensure that your union members will be able to get their increment or know when they'll get the benefits of that increment? Is it going to be added in at the point of retirement? Is it going to be 5 years from now when, let's all hope that there is a solid economic rebound? Or is it never going to be calculated into their final sum of money when they do retire or leave public service? How do you guarantee that if it's not in the document?
The document, Marlene, will guarantee that the increment is factored into the calculation, the superannuation government. The document will take care of that. Now, getting back the reinstatement of the increment is the issue at hand that hinges on the recovery of the economy. So it's I don't know if you understand clearly what I just said.
You're saying that it will be factored in at retirement.
Yes, to calculate your superannuation benefit.
Okay.
So it will be put into that mix of the calculation, and that is what the committee will work out. So once the committee is formulated, the committee will then come up with that formula. Because remember, beyond in 2021 and beyond, several public officers will be retiring. And so that formula has to be worked out in the immediate, and you will be, and the perm increment will be factored into the mix of the calculation of your superannuation benefit. Now, the reinstatement of that increment that would allow you to be bumped up another salary scale is what is the issue at hand in terms of the recovery of the economy. And so I trust sorry, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question.
I just wanted to be clear. You don't want union members sitting home saying, but when will I get it? So the reinstatement of the increments, you're saying, is going to be decided by the committee that is put together and be tied specifically to economic recovery.
Yes.
So by the end of today, we're going to see an agreement or be aware of an agreement between the unions and the government in looking at cost-saving measures, both in terms of withholding or foregoing increments for this year, and also establishing a committee to look at more cost-saving measures. That's what you're saying to us.
Yes, I have every confidence that I don't see why it has to extend beyond the course of the day, but I expect that public officers will see a final and signed copy of an addendum to Circular 5 that addresses this matter clearly, and what the union has been doing since the meeting is to try to, as much as possible, disseminate this information and explain to public officers and teachers, well, there are also public officers now, to explain to the wider public service that what we agreed to, and like as I said, what should be our focus now? Our focus should not be continuing this debate, because it's getting us nowhere, and it's taking away from wonderful opportunity for us to come together and see how we can fix the way how we do business in public service.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the update. We do appreciate it. We've seen this issue go full circle now. And we will look forward to hearing the announcement of the agreement by the end of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. There you have it. That was Dean Flowers, the Vice President of the Public Service Union, providing an update on the union and government negotiations. And definitely we're going to look forward to following that up in the newscast tonight at 6 p.m. But we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we will be back in a few. Stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.